talk about is what is called the development of a personal philosophy of life. And in life, there are two basic worldviews, and basically they're at opposite ends of the pole, and sometimes we fall in the middle. But the first worldview is a benevolent worldview. People with a benevolent worldview are those who have a positive mental attitude, generally speaking, toward themselves and their life. They believe in their own potential. They believe in love and life and beauty. They believe in growing to the realization of their full capabilities. They believe that life is pretty good and that they can have a major impact. They can make a contribution and do something substantial with their lives. People with a benevolent worldview are the movers and shakers and the builders of all of time. Now, the other type of people are those who have a malevolent worldview. These are people who have a negative mental attitude, if you like, and they have, first of all, a negative mental attitude toward themselves. They have a negative mental attitude toward other people, toward the world. They see injustice and oppression. They see unhappiness and misery. They see unfairness and people having a hard life. They have a tendency to be angry and to have low self-esteem, but always a malevolent worldview requires someone or something else to blame, someone or something to criticize, something to be down on. That's why you find that people with a malevolent worldview are always in contra-opposition, or if you like, in conflict with people with a benevolent worldview. In order for you to achieve your potential, remember the most important people, the most productive people, the most creative people are always those who have a benevolent, positive, constructive worldview, and that's your goal.
The important key to effective living, then, is not trying to find the way to set things right and to straighten people out and to get the world to stop acting like it does. Not to set things right, but to see them rightly. The whole principle is based upon ourselves. It is not the world that we're concerned about, but our thought about the world. Thought for the average person is a reflex process. In other words, things happen and we react in thought. We become worried, we become fearful, we become concerned and anxious, or on the other hand, we become happy and inspired. And we assume, and this assumption is almost universally prevalent among people, we assume that the thoughts that we think are produced by the circumstances that we experience. Things happen and we react, we think, and we say, well, of course I'm upset. You'd be upset too if you had the same experiences. Life is a continuous reaction to outside stimuli to the average person. So one may be happy or sad, or life has meaning or is meaningless by evidence of what happens to us from day to day. But experiences do not cause thoughts. Emphasize, experiences do not cause thoughts. Someone may do something to you, and he may give you a perfect opportunity to be upset if you want to be upset. But if you don't want to be upset, you needn't be upset, you see. The incident happens. There's no use denying it. It's not saying that he didn't say it or it didn't happen or they're not doing these things in the world out there. They've happened, and it becomes history once it's happened. But as far as your experience is concerned, the incident is completely external. It's always on the outside. What happens in your mind happens as a result of your attitudes and your feelings and your habit patterns. Your mind is your domain. Now this is fundamental, and these words are easy to express, but it's so important to get this into our consciousness. You think what you want to think, or you think what you have habitually thought by a certain tendency of habit patterns. Your thoughts are your reactions to the incident, always. The incident did not make the thought. It is your mind, and you have been thinking and reacting in thought according to the level of your consciousness. When was the last time you said, he makes me so mad? Or that just tees me off? And of course, this is not correct at all. No one ever makes you mad. No one ever gets you upset. As I say often, you are upset because you're upsettable. You're angry because you have a anger consciousness that is touched like a little red button that causes it to blow up within yourself. But the anger is already within, you see. So you react in thinking to the level, according to the level of your attitudes, according to your consciousness. So the thing that happens then is we allow our mental mastery to go by default. Some of us are completely unaware of the fact that we have the power to control the kind of thoughts that run rampant in our minds. Therefore, you have to ask yourself the question from time to time. When you find yourself terribly upset or concerned or anxious or worried about something that's happened, take a good look in yourself and ask yourself this one question. Not why do they do this? Why is the world falling apart? Why do we have so many problems in life? But why do I allow people or experiences or things to determine how I'm going to think or feel or act? This I can do something about. So the very first step in this process that we're calling the art of thinking is to know that no matter what happens in your world, no matter what happens out there, no matter what you read in the papers, no matter what is taking place around you or to you, you always have a choice. You don't have to be worried. You don't have to be fearful. You can choose to think positively or creatively if that's the way you want.
How many here feel better when the weather outside is great? There's physiological reasons for that. Endorphins are released, chemical substances inside the mind through sunlight. How many do better when you feel better? That means we're reactive to the physical culture. If you were proactive, you would carry your weather within you, regardless of the physical culture. And through exuding positive energy and smiling, you also release endorphins. What about the social culture? How many feel better when you're treated better? How many do better when you feel better? That's being reactive to the social weather, the social culture. What if you could learn to carry your social weather inside so that you can be consistent in extremely difficult, adverse situations, in handling major setbacks or disappointments? For instance, Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist, imprisoned in the death camps of Nazi Germany because he was a Jew, experienced unbelievable indignities and tortures. But while he was in the death camps, he began to observe some very interesting things. Some people were animals, others were saints, with the same circumstances. He himself experienced terrible things. Some of his own loved ones were cremated. He expected the same fate. For some reason, they saved him for experimental purposes. One day, they stripped him naked, put him under white light, and began to perform those ignoble sterilization experiments upon his body. And he discovered what he called the last human freedom. The power to choose my response to any condition, to anything that happens to me. He called the last human freedom. And he cultivated a sense of meaning so that he saw himself in his imagination lecturing to his students in Austria following his release from the death camp about the very experiences he was having at the time, about the insights, the learnings he was acquiring. And he came to postulate that the highest value at all is the power to choose your attitude in situations over which you have no control. That was the last human freedom. If you want to see evidence of that, how many of you have ever had a loved one, a dear friend, family member, go through a terminal illness with a magnificent attitude? How many have experienced that? Between what happens to us, the stimulus, whatever has happened to us, or what is now happening to us, between that stimulus and our response is a space. In that space lies our power and our freedom to choose our response. In these choices lie our growth and our happiness. In other words, with the right choices, eventually the response we choose begins to influence the stimulus. This is what Viktor Frankl discovered. And through exercising his memory, that is his self-awareness, and his imagination, and his conscience, by asking questions such as, what is this situation asking of me, instead of, what do I ask of it? Why are they doing this to me? And also by exercising his own independent will, this freedom became larger and larger until it was larger than his Nazi captors. Not his liberty. Liberty is a condition of the environment. Freedom is a condition of the person, of the internals. We have control over our freedom, not in the short run over our liberty. However, in many situations, not necessarily all, the more you control your freedom and expand and deepen it, eventually you will influence the liberty of your life, the options, the alternatives that are available to you. Eventually, your head will create your world. Your response to the stimulus will eventually influence the stimulus. And to some degree, he experienced that. He also had the hypothesis, or tried to look at the hypothesis. What enables these people in the death camps to survive? Is it their survival skills? No. Is it their intelligence? No. Is it their health? No. Those things were eventually equalized, lost, helped a little initially, but eventually they were gone. Is it their family structure? No. The thing that enabled survival was a vision of the future, a sense of meaning about a work yet to do, a contribution yet to make. And this became the basis for his brilliant autobiographical account of these experiences called Man's Search for Meaning. Even a friend of his was so miserable he wanted to commit suicide, and Frankel pressed him, "Why don't you?" He said, "Because if I predeceased my wife, it would make her so unhappy and miserable, and I love her so." That alone gave him meaning to survive. And he would constantly ask the question, what is life asking of you in this situation? Don't let the things you can do nothing about interfere with the things you can do a great deal about. One time, my brother and I were going down a canyon road with a cousin. He was chopping wood, had this axe. There was a rattler. He started chasing it. He started chopping at it. Eventually, cut it in two. The front bit him right here, at the crook between the forefinger and the thumb. So many ways he could have responded. He could have chased that poisonous snake and driven the poison to the heart. He was smart, quick, proactive, subordinated feelings to values, got the blood out as fast as he could. Many people get hurt by someone. It does hurt them. But the real injury is going after the person, going after the snake. That's what drives the poison to the heart. It's not what people do to us that hurts us in the most fundamental sense. It's our chosen response to what they do to us that hurts us. Reactive people want to get back. They want to get even. They gather people around them that massage their heart and validate them and give them additional evidence to justify them and to condemn someone else out there who has done this injury. A lot of people gather together daily and confess the sins of their bosses. It becomes the fabric, the content of the coffee break and the lunch. Highly reactive. Proactive people learn to get the poison out and to move on. As Eleanor Roosevelt put it, nothing can make you feel inferior without your consent. As Gandhi put it, no one can take away your respect unless you give it to him. Proactive people who act on the basis of their values, their purposes, their vision, don't give their power away, their freedom, their power to choose, to other people's weaknesses. We simply must never build our emotional life around the weaknesses of other people. Otherwise, we disempower ourselves and empower their weaknesses to continue to mess our life up. This is heavy-duty stuff, particularly for people that have had years and years of explaining away their misery in the name of somebody else. One time, a woman stood up in the middle of a group like this and started to give a speech on her own, spontaneously. And then she sensed the inappropriateness of that, grew a little embarrassed and sat back down, but she could not restrain herself from talking to everyone around her. She was just filled with some kind of explosive learning or excitement. And she had positive energy. You could see it in her eyes, in her gestures, her body language. I could hardly wait to the break to get up to her. What happened to you? Oh, you have no idea what that principle, that habit of being proactive means to me. I'm the full-time nurse to the most miserable, ungrateful character you can imagine. He doesn't even acknowledge me, let alone show any form of appreciation. The other full-time nurses feel just like I do. We almost sit around and talk about his demise. And for you to have the gall to suggest that I chose to be miserable? Come on. I didn't choose it. He made me. But then I realized how dependent I am, how I've given my power to his miserable behavior. She said, as soon as I swallowed that big, thick, bitter pill, and it hit, and I realized, wait a minute, if I chose to be miserable, I can choose otherwise. She said, I was let out of prison. I was liberated. That's when I stood up. I wanted to talk to everyone. I wanted to proclaim my freedom. I could not contain myself. I just can't tell you what that means. Between what happens to us, the stimulus, and our response to the stimulus lies our freedom. Think on it this way. 2 circles. The larger outer circle you call the circle of concern. Things you're concerned about. Things you're worried about. But then there is an inner circle. It's very small. That are concerns you have influence over. Where do proactive people focus their energies? Which circle? The inner circle. Where do reactive people focus their energies? The outer circle. Why? Because they're victimized. Look at this person I have to live with. Look at how my boss has dead-ended my career. Look at these kids. They're driving me crazy. Always work on the inner circle. It is a marvelous thing. It is inevitable. Inevitable. If you work on the inner circle, it'll get larger. Always. Why? The energy there is positive.
You can become the master instead of the slave. Oh, it's not easy. Now, let's not kid ourselves. It's not easy to take possession of our mind. To change from being a reflex thinker to a creative thinker. It takes a lot of discipline and will and commitment because we've been thinking in the other way so long. But we can do so. This is the key to the positive life. This is the key to positive thinking. But it's simply determining that you have control and you can think the kind of thoughts that you want to think. And making the commitment at the beginning of the day and regularly through the day that you're not going to allow people or conditions or circumstances to decide how you're going to think or feel.